irrefutable evidence that Iran deliberately violated international obligations. Let's listen.
Have Iran's fingerprints all over it. 4 days ago, Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif wrote an op-ed assuring the world that Iran has been misunderstood. He wrote, quote, Iran's military capabilities comply with international law and are entirely defensive. Instead of stoking violence, Zarif promised that Iran and its partners, quote, labor to put out fires while the arsonists in our region grow more unhinged. But the United Nations just released a new report that tells the opposite story. It tells the story of Iran as the arsonist. The report shows the Tehran regime not putting out fires, but fanning the flames of conflict in the region. This was Secretary General's fourth report detailing Iranian compliance or non-compliance with UN Resolution 2231. That resolution places specific prohibitions on Iranian conduct. In its strongest language yet, the Secretary General's report describes violation after violation of weapons transfers and ballistic missile activity. The United States welcomes this report, as should every nation concerned about Iranian expansion. We are grateful for the depth of the UN's inspection and analysis. Most telling, the report makes a convincing case that Iran is illegally providing the Houthi militants in Yemen with dangerous weapons. The report provides devastating evidence of missiles, conventional arms, and explosive boats of Iranian origin used by the rebels in Yemen, all of which violate UN resolutions. The United States and our partners went to great lengths to support the UN investigations into Iranian violations by declassifying evidence so that the world could better be informed of the extent of Iran's malign activities. As you know, we do not often declassify this type of military equipment recovered from these attacks. But today, we are taking an extraordinary step of presenting it here in an open setting. We did this for a single urgent purpose. Because the Iranian regime cannot be allowed to engage in its lawless behavior any longer. International peace and security depends on us working together against the Iranian regime's hostile actions. The fight against Iranian aggression is the world's fight. The United States is acting today in the spirit of transparency and international cooperation that is necessary to defeat this threat. In this warehouse is concrete evidence of illegal Iranian weapons proliferation gathered from direct military attacks on our partners in the region. Behind me is an example of one of these attacks. These are the recovered pieces of a missile fired by Houthi militants from Yemen into Saudi Arabia. The missile's intended target was the civilian airport in Riyadh, through which tens of thousands of passengers travel each day. I repeat, the missile was used to attack an international civilian airport in a G20 country. Just imagine if this missile had been launched at Dulles Airport or JFK, or the airports in Paris, London, or Berlin. That's what we're talking about here. That's what Iran is actively supporting. What is most revealing about this missile is what's not here. This is a short-range ballistic missile. It is missing the large stabilizer fins that are typically present on these kinds of missiles. The Iranian Guillaume missile is the only known short-range ballistic missile in the world that lacks such stabilizer fins and includes 9 valves that you will see running along the length of the missile. Those valves are essentially Iranian missile fingerprints. On your walkthrough, you will also see missile debris stamped with the logo of Shahid Bagheri Industries, an Iranian manufacturer. Those are just 2 of the many pieces of evidence that tell us of this missile's Iranian origins. It was made in Iran, then sent to Houthi militants in Yemen. From there, it was fired at a civilian airport, with the potential to kill hundreds of innocent civilians in Saudi Arabia. You will see more than that. In this warehouse, there is also material from an anti-tank guided missile. Such missiles have a range of over 2 miles and can destroy tanks and even buildings. You will see material from an unmanned aerial vehicle, also known as a kamikaze drone, that can take out radar sites. You will see material from the Shark 33 explosive boat. These are boats with a warhead inside them that explodes on impact. They can blow 6 feet wide holes in the hulls of ships. All of these weapons include parts made in Iran, some by Iran's government-run defense industry. All are proof that Iran has defied the international community, and not just one time. This evidence demonstrates a pattern of behavior in which Iran sows conflict and extremism in direct violation of UN Security Council resolutions. In just a minute, Laura Seal from our Defense Department will walk you through the items gathered here and explain their connection to the Tehran regime. We welcome a thorough examination of this material, not just by the members of the press here today, but by the international community. Several countries will be sending delegations here to view this material in the next few days. Some have already been here. We are inviting the entire UN Security Council to see it for themselves, and we are inviting all members of Congress to view it. This evidence is part of what has led the U.S. intelligence community to conclude unequivocally that these weapons were supplied by the Iranian regime. The evidence is undeniable. The weapons might as well have had "Made in Iran" stickers all over it. The United States stands ready to share what we know to further the cause of peace. We ask our friends and our allies to do the same. Iran is determined to undermine the international consensus against its conduct. We must speak with one voice in exposing the regime for what it is: a threat to the peace and security of the entire world. We call on all nations to join us in a united front resisting this global threat. I will be happy to take your questions. I do first want to thank the Department of Defense, their intelligence experts, all that went into this. When you look at this missile, this is terrifying. This is absolutely terrifying. And this is why it has to stop. We have said multiple times that this is not just about the nuclear program. This is about everything else they're doing, because Iran believes that they have been given a pass. It is incumbent on the international community to show not only are they not being given a pass, but all of these actions have to stop, and stop immediately. And we'll continue to do that as we go forward. So Laura Seal will be giving you a tour. I'm now going to open it up for questions. I'm going to respectfully ask that we keep the questions all on foreign policy. If you have any other questions to follow, Cheney will be happy to answer those. But we'll go ahead and get started. Elise, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for having us.
All right, that's UN Ambassador Nikki Haley unveiling some previously classified information. We were told this was coming, proving that Iran violated international obligations. Iranians provided the Houthi rebels, she said, in Yemen with arms, showing that Iran deliberately violated international obligations. As she just detailed, the Secretary General's report describes violation after violation, a trend of this, she pointed to, of weapons transfers and ballistic missile activity. Congressman Jason Chaffetz is on the couch with us right now, something you know a lot about. What did you make of what you just heard from the ambassador?
No, it's not only an allegation, but there's evidence sitting behind the ambassador there. Not this last Thanksgiving, but the one before, I was actually on the USS San Jacinto, which was a Navy destroyer. To the west, you have Saudi Arabia. To the east, you have Iran. But to the south, you have Yemen and Oman. And the concern is that the Iranians are moving these weapons to help the Houthi rebels, and that they're firing these weapons into Saudi Arabia, who's been an ally of us. We've actually been supported. When I went there, you actually have U.S. troops helping in Saudi Arabia, trying to monitor and see what these Houthi rebels are doing. So again, it moves beyond just an allegation to actual evidence, and it is It is something that has to be dealt with and is in clear violation of the agreements that are put in place with Iran.
You know, she's just given us a great deal of information that we can track on our own. And of course, we have access now, as the rest of the world does, to this information. It's public, it's unclassified. You heard Ambassador Haley inviting other countries, and some have already done this through their dignitaries, to come in and examine our evidence. That's important because the UN, as we know, it's interesting how they pick their battles and how sometimes they don't. So you got to present that. But what you're talking about, those weapons being fired in Saudi Arabia, the evidence that she gave, that warehouse of weapons where these things are being used by the Houthis to go from Yemen to a civilian airport,
right,
where thousands of people gather every day, as they do at airports here and any other country in the G20, in Riyadh. I mean, that's like, as she said, that's the equivalency of hitting a major airport in the United States.
So, as Congressman just said, these aren't allegations. This is evidence that she's presenting, some of it standing right behind her, Katie. So we have yet to know whether or not the president, with this information, will act to punish Iran.
Well, it's very interesting because this report that they're basing, that the evidence is coming from, came from the UN. And as we know, as Harris just mentioned, they haven't always been so keen on going after Iran in terms of violations of any kind of international agreement. But what the White House laid out in October was President Trump's new objectives when it came to Iran. And unlike the Obama administration, they are willing to go after Iran's behavior. And in his declaration, in the big speech that he gave, he specifically called out Iran and said, we will not allow them to use these kinds of weapons, the very weapons sitting behind Nikki Haley in that warehouse, to go after the United States or to go after our allies in the region. So they've really focused on that as an issue. And so this is going to give them even more backup now in terms of decertifying the nuclear agreement and saying that was a bad deal because it didn't focus on behavior, and it matters in terms of the stabilization of the region. And it's exactly why Saudi Arabia now is working with the Israelis and why the Egyptians are working with the Israelis in the region and creating new alliances in that region.
And this is physical evidence. I mean, she went down the list of how we know that this particular ballistic missile came from Iran, all the marks on it that make it unique to the weapons that they use. That Riyadh International Airport, I've been there myself. I mean, this is a major thoroughfare. These are civilians. These are innocent people. This is not a military installation. This is an international airport, and they're lobbing missiles at a passenger airport. That's totally unacceptable, and here is the evidence right here, and it's important because it violates that agreement because Iran is transferring ballistic missiles to another country. They're not allowed to do that under the agreement. And so here's the evidence. Now we'll see what's done about it.
And the timing, of course, January 13th is the next deadline by which the president has to again certify whether or not Iran is in compliance with the nuclear deal.
A month from now.
The Houthis do not have the capability, nor do they have the resources to pull this off themselves. The big question will be, what will President Trump and our allies do?
All right. Well, we will leave it there. Oh, okay. We are going to talk tax.